Welcome back to the I Am Passionate podcast. I hope you all are enjoying your day. I'm back with another episode, but before I kind of get into that, I just want to say with, those of you who listen to my podcast and maybe watch like the video games that I post, the reason why I have not posted like any video game content is because I'm having problems with my PS5 that I'm hoping to get resolved very, very soon. But in today's episode of the I Am Passionate podcast, I'm going to be talking about season 2 of the live action Avatar the Last Airbender on Netflix. So I just want to say now that if you are A, currently watching it, or B, you haven't watched it yet, there will be some spoilers, in this, episode. So maybe pause this episode, spend your day watching the episode. I mean, it's hot outside, so like, I know some of you are probably at work, but like, man, I wish I was at home in the AC. Well, when you finally get home and you're in the AC, watch an Avatar the Last Airbender. And I'm also going to give some of my like expectations on like season 3. But before fully diving in, I just want to say I really do like the live action. I liked the first season. I liked the second season. I think it's a really good live action adaptation. And so, like, if I had to give, just a few action adaptations, I think are really, really good. Which I'm not including Marvel. Like, I'm not going to include Infinity War or Endgame in this because, like, those have a much bigger budget. Which maybe they actually don't. I'm kind of just assuming they do because of all the stars in those movies. While, for Avatar the Last, Airbender live action, I believe easily the most famous person in the live action, series is the Fire Lord. I think his name is Daniel Day Kim. But yeah, I would imagine that because it's Netflix, I imagine that there's probably a pretty decent budget, but like I'm imagining that it's nothing insane. But if I had to say my 3 favorite live action adaptations of things, I'm gonna put After the Last Airbender as number 1. I think the people like the cast and the portrayal. I think it's really really good. Number 2, I'm gonna say Aladdin, which that is probably a hot take because in the original, the genie, Robin Williams, perfect portrayal, and I think Will Smith for what he could do. I think he had a pretty good portrayal of the genie. Certainly not as good as Robin Williams, but I still think it was a good portrayal. And number 3, I'm gonna say Beauty and the Beast. I think Emma Watson she put on an amazing performance in that movie. She portrayed Belle very very well, rhyming accidentally. But I think that ultimately I respect the idea that with the Avatar: The Last Airbender live action, they're doing some things new, they're doing some things different. I respect it. I think that when I was watching both seasons, like when the first season came out, I believe in 2024, I wasn't watching to compare it to the original because I feel like if I compare it to the original consistently, I just think I'm just going to take away my enjoyment for what the live action is trying to do. Uh, I'm just trying to, just enjoy the live action for just what it is. Like, if it was like the movie that came out in like 2010, then like, yeah, I'm sure I would be frustrated. Like, and I'm not like the most critical of people, but like I do have some gripes with the live action, not that many. Um, but yeah, no. Before kind of talking about like the pros and cons, I truly had not seen any negative feedback on social media. Like I was talking to one of my friends about it, told him I have not seen any negative feedback, and now all I'm seeing is negative feedback, which I think is crazy. And if I had to say the number one thing that I've seen people kind of complain about, other than like the differences, it would be the dialogue, in which the dialogue does not bother me because most like if I had to say it from the original standpoint, they're like 12, 13, 14 years old. Get in the live action, they might not have kept, that portrayal just because, I mean, the actors themselves have gotten older, but still, it's not like most of these characters, with the exception of like Uncle Iroh, the Fire Lord. It's not like most of them are like in their 50s, like those two are being much older. So like these are still, teenagers, potentially young adults. I don't know what the live action is accurately trying to depict them as. So like the dialogue being like cringy at times, it does not bother me one bit. Like if it wasn't cringy, I'd be like, really? Because like let's just use the first season as an example, because when it was filmed, I believe the actor was like of Aang was actually like the same age. If he didn't have any cringy dialogue, if his dialogue was all super serious, I would have been like, what? Because like Aang is a kid, he's just the silly like kid, and like I think it's important for to kind of have the dialogue match the characters themselves, like their age. Like if they're 16 and they're speaking like they're 40 years old, I think that's kind of weird. Not even just for like Avatar, just for like anything in general. So enough about that. The pros. Again, the biggest pro I have is the cast. I feel like who they got to play Aang, Sokka, Katara, Azula, Zuko, Uncle Iroh, Toph, which I get it. I just named basically the important characters, but like also like the Kyoshi Warriors, Avatar Kyoshi, um, the Philo. I feel like it was just amazing cast. I feel like they picked like the perfect people to portray these characters. Um, if I had to say like in season two, who were like my like favorite depictions of the characters, it's kind of a longer list, but like I'm honestly gonna say three people from the Fire Nation: Zula, Uncle Iroh, Zuko. I loved how all three of those were portrayed, and I loved it like Toph. Like I feel like the actress who played Toph did an amazing job. So like shout out to her. Everyone I feel like has done an amazing job. So like shout out to everyone. Um, I think I'm just biased toward Toph because Toph is my favorite Avatar the Last Airbender character. Um, but yeah, I think like Katara and Sokka, for example, I feel like they portray siblings perfectly. Like they still have their serious moments, just like they did in the original. Like kind of comparing that at least a little bit. But I feel like they're also like bringing in like their own like silly nature. They have like their like funny lines, like that they share moments when it's appropriate. But the other pro I'm gonna say is like the unique, and here's the first true spoiler I'm gonna give. I'm 50-50 with how they decided to handle the spirit library. By that I mean I loved seeing Toph interact with Avatar Kyoshi. I loved seeing Aang interact with Avatar Yang Chen. I just think that, in the original, most of the time when you were to see, like the past avatars, it's really only like with Aang speaking to them directly, or like the few times where like a past avatar basically manifested like into Aang. Like in the first season with I think his name was Chin the Conqueror. When like the people in the Earth Nation, like at least the part of the Earth Nation, they did not like the Avatar, and like they were burning the giant statues of them, and like how Avatar Kyoshi basically um talked about, yeah, how she did do the things that they were claiming that she had did. Avatar Roku in the original with the essentially in the first season when Aang was basically had a chance to learn some firebending from Zhang Zhang. And Avatar Roku manifested and basically, had like one of the coolest moments. Like with like, hey, I did this a million times and I could do it again. Um, so like I like seeing the interactions with past avatars, differently than like how I've seen them before. I think it was just really, really cool. I think the reason why I'm 50-50 with the Spirit Library in particular is because, with some of the things that they're leaving out of, season two, like the whole like desert, like journey, like the spirit, like the journey to like the library itself. Um, I'm not sure. Like I think like the Wang Chitong, the the library guardian spirit. I think it was well depicted. I think I just would have liked them to actually go into the desert. But my thing is like, I'm also just thinking about like how much does whatever the budget is. Let's just say the budget is well into the millions. Let's just say maybe at most, which like I get it. I'm probably about to say a crazy number. Let's just say if the budget is $5 million. I would imagine, considering how many episodes the original series is, the budget you probably can't do to have like, you know, you probably can't have the same budget of $5 million and have as many episodes. Like, yeah, I just don't see that happening, unfortunately. Now, if they did have the budget and they were choosing to leave these out, that's different. But yeah, I just think that the likely budget of this series is probably what restricts them. Is probably like a main reason as to why some things are sped up. Um, But hey, it is what it is in that front. Another thing I really, really liked is the fight choreography. Um, I just think specifically when like Zuko is fighting, this was like in the first and the second season, I just like seeing like the firebenders fight. Ty Lee, and Mai, like their like fight scenes, I think were really, really cool. Like kind of just like seeing them like fight. Azula, also shout out to her because like I feel like seeing like her fight, her get in some action, I think was really, really cool. Katara, like I'll name a specific scene not from a Firebender. Um, Essentially when at the end of season two, just like in the original, how Katara and Aang are fighting Azula and Zuko. Katara has this move. I think she called it like the octopus or squid arms, but that's basically what she resembles. Um, I think that was like really, really cool. Kind of like seeing them like do that, which I think she did it earlier in the season, at least in the cartoon. I have to think, I have to go back and double check and see if she had done like if she had did that waterbending technique earlier in the live action, because that off the top of my head I don't remember. I only watched the live action once. Um, just because like I was kind of was sitting with my thoughts for like the last few days, kind of just before like getting on the podcast. Um, and so yeah, those I'd say are my probably my three biggest pros. Oh, and also like with Toph, like just because Toph is my favorite character. Um, I really liked basically when um basically the Fire Nation was like on their trail, and essentially Aang and Toph kind of split up from the rest of the group on their way to Ba Sing Se, and essentially, you know, um, Toph had taken the opportunity to help, not even like basically teach Aang further about firebending, and it was the boulder and the Beifong like attendant like on their trail, and so basically Aang was just not able at the time to do what Toph was trying to teach. And then there was the moment where the boulder had sent a boulder flying toward Aang. Aang dodged, and Toph just stood there, punched it, which I just thought was cool. Um, and if I had to say a scene that I think in the cartoon that I think they did better than like than the like live action, it's the scene where Toph basically invented metal bending. Um, I really liked the change of like Toph's mom being the one to like capture Toph and like bring her back. I thought that I was not expecting it until like basically like seconds before like stuff went down. Um, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, are they really gonna make Toph's mom into like this super loving, understanding mom? I'm like, there's no way. That's too good to be true. Um, and so yeah, like in the cartoon, she was like, I am the greatest earthbender to like ever live, and don't you two dunderheads ever forget it. Don't copyright me. I'm just saying the line. I've seen Avatar, enough times to remember pretty much the exact line. Um, I just think that line was an iconic line. So like it not being brought, I was like, dang. But I mean, I still think the scene was well done, all things considered. Um, so like I'm not really like mad at it. I just would have thought it was funny seeing like the Dunderheads line. Like that's it, really. So like I think if anything, most of my air quotes complaints are more so like if they didn't do it, I just would have like liked them to do it or have their own nod to it in their own way. Which I mean they did, but like the scene when basically Aang had met Azula for the first time, and how basically just like in the cartoon, like how Azula covered her face and she did her Zuko impression. um I think the Dunderheads line when Toph invents metal bending, I think is like it's not Toph's most iconic line, but it's definitely up there in my opinion. So now we're going to talk about the cons, but let me know your thoughts down below if you've seen the live action, or let me know your thoughts down below on, say, your favorite character, whether it's in the original or the live action. Let me know your favorite season. Let me know what element you would bend if you had the chance. Me, if I had the chance, I would be an earthbender. Um, I just think earthbending is cool. But at the same time, I think a part of me would probably pick firebending, which not for the reasons of villainy. I just think that, like, for me at least, being a firebender. Like I feel like for me, if I was a firebender, I would probably have a few more uses of being a firebender than I would being an earthbender. That's just me thinking off the top of my head. Now I feel like all of them would have like I could think of and use them all very, very productively. Um, I just think if I like, I think I guess I probably could make a lot of money, if I was a firebender or even a waterbender, for example. I probably could make a lot of money being like all of them personally. I'm just thinking of myself personally. But if I had to rank which elements I would want to bend, because like I think all of them are like they have the same like amount of like pros and cons. But I would put Earth at first. I just think it's a very versatile, element to bend. And like offensively and defensively. Second, I think I would put water, despite me saying I think I would be a firebender. Um, I think water. Um, I think like I wouldn't think of it like you want it for like the blood bending purposes, even though I feel like blood bending is probably what makes like if someone was to say that water is the most like there's like the strongest element because of blood bending, I wouldn't argue with you. Um, but I think I would just pick water bending just because like I think there's like just like with earth, I think there's just a lot of versatile ways to use like water bending, for example. Um, third on the list, I think I'd pick air. Um, because like being able to like fly, like being able to like glide, which I get Aang more glides than flies, but like I just think that's cool. Um, and then fourth, I'd say is firebending. I would say maybe just because firebending, what I would say is technically the most dangerous element to bend. Necessarily like if you're untrained at least. So like I myself would view myself as probably like an earthbender first and maybe like a firebender second, even though that my zodiac sign is an air sign. Yes, I found a way to bring that into the episode. Um, but let me know in the comment down below as to what element you all think I would be. Like if you was to like just what element you picture me bending. But enough about that. We're going to talk about some of the cons, which the only thing I noticed myself actively comparing to the original in like the live action by it's like the timeline. If I remember correctly, essentially Aang had to learn all of the elements before the end of summer to defeat the Fire Lord, or else basically the Fire Nation would win the war. This, it seems like years have passed, and I say that not just because of quite literally the obvious. I believe it's been 2 years in between season one and season two, and the only actor who looks visibly like older would be Aang. He's older, he's taller, and then another spoiler. Um, in the season, basically like early when Team Avatar is meeting with like basically caught up with Suki. Suki basically said to Avatar's like, "Dang, you got tall." Um, which yeah, he's taller now, and plus, his voice, he's got a deeper voice just because the actor has gotten older. But I still think he's still a very good depiction of Avatar Aang. I think he's still doing a great job. Um, so like I've seen people online saying like, oh, they should have filmed this, like faster, which like a part of me does agree, but like I know that like the odds of them having filmed this faster are pretty low because like I don't know if some of the other characters would have had other roles in like other TV shows or movies, but I would not be surprised if they had other obligations, things that would have prevented them from, filming 3 seasons of work in such a short time. So like I think it's just also unrealistic. Even if these were all like your stars in Hollywood, I don't think they would have been able to film this, that quickly. Like there's too many important characters in the series to, having filmed them super duper quickly. And I feel like if they did film it super quickly, it might have actually come out a little rushed. So I think I'm more so like appreciating the fact that, they've taken their time with this and they're doing their best to get like to depict the characters as accurately as they can. And I feel like they're doing a good job. Um, and so the other thing I would say is I would have liked for the desert episodes to have been included. which I would say that's like the main thing I'm saying about it. It just because I made your spoilers ahead, even though that I'm sorry, I just gave a spoiler for those of you who have not seen it. Um, but I think that how Appa was taken in the cartoon, I think was just better than in the live action. Like, um, even though that yes, in both, Aang was very emotional and very upset that he had lost like his best friend in Appa. Um, I just think that um I don't know. It almost seemed like the stakes were a little higher in the cartoon, only because like with them being in like the desert and like it's super hot, and Katara is doing everything she can to help the like Team Avatar escape the desert. And like I think that was an important part of like all of their characters, like just kind of them struggling to get out of the desert that way. Um, and so not having it is not the end of the world. Don't get me wrong. I just think that that was an important scene for all of their characters. So it's like in the live action, yes, it ended up being a very important scene, but like I think if they were able to include, the desert scene, that only would have helped the characters grow even further. That's my take. And so those are really just the two cons that I have. So I'm gonna give some of my expectations for what needs to be in season three, and I'm more so listing the amount of scenes that need to be in it, more so not the episodes. Now, I do think, actually, I would say I would appreciate if they were able to make more episodes for the final season than they did for the first two seasons. I think just because, you know, it's essentially the end of the story, not counting the Legend of Korra, not because of my own opinions on it, just, you know, Legend of Korra, different story. Um, I think that like some of the scenes that are gonna most likely, because like according to the like I saw it on TikTok, I believe it was from the actual like Avatar the Last Airbender like live action account, that season three had already been filmed. And so like yeah, I remember seeing the actor for Zuko basically talking about like how he's gonna miss filming because he had gotten close with the actor for Katara. Um in like so like they're good friends. But like one of the scenes that are pretty obvious that are going to be in the final season is going to be like the Agni Kai between I almost combined their names, Zuko and Azula. That I feel like is one of like the important scenes that need to be included. Which, by the way, all of the things I have on my list, they're just more so like me numbering the amount of things that I think need to be in the final season. These are not of order of importance. And yeah, so that, but first on the list is going to be Zuko and Uncle Iroh reuniting before Sozin's comet arrives. I think that scene in the cartoon was just so amazingly done, and I think it needs to be in the live action to some extent. Like I would be very impressed if they're able to capture the same emotion behind it, but I would not be surprised if they were able to still make that scene very, very emotional. Um, Number two on my list is Zuko and Aang with like the civilization that they found with like some like the original like firebenders, with like how they had like the dragon and they learned the true way of firebending. I think that was like in a very important scene, because I feel like after that whole scene, the Zuko that we had seen up until that point, like highly different character, like after seeing like the dragons and learning like the true way of firebending. um so like, I think on like that is a very very important scene that needs to be included. Number three, I'm gonna say Katara learning how to bloodbend. I want to say the character's name in the waterbender in the Fire Nation, her name is Hama or Hema. I can't remember. I know it starts with an H. um but I feel like Katara learning how to bloodbend was also very important to the story, even though that thinking about it, she had only done it a handful of times. Um, I think that it's still like an important thing for her to like have even in the live action, which I don't know how they're gonna do that budget wise or how they're gonna make that look, but I think it's important. Number four, which is one of my personal favorites for what needs to be included, when Zuko joins Team Avatar to teach, Aang firebending, the one who did not give Zuko a pleasant welcome is Katara. That scene being very intense. And so I think that needs to be included. And number 5 on the list, which is probably the scene, especially at this point in my life right now, that I relate to the most. The scene where Zuko, Ty Lee, Mai, and Azula, they're at that beach, and that beach, like, basically it just gets people to talk. I don't remember what the actual phenomenon was, but the four, they were at the beach at night, and essentially, like all three, like the girls were kind of like pressing Zuko and like trying to understand like why Zuko was feeling the way that he did, and basically the whole scene is like, I'm angry at myself. I think that was an important scene for both his character and just kind of like the show itself. So I think those are my 5 picks for things that need to be included in season 3. Let me know what scenes that you have to, like, you think need to be in season 3. And the final Avatar thought that I'm going to include is another scene that I really liked in season 2 of the live action, and it was when essentially Uncle Iroh had gone to the tree and kind of was talking about his son, and I believe essentially you could hear like leaves from the vine, which in the original that was a very very sad scene, as that episode was a nod to the original voice actor for Uncle Iroh, which I do think that scene in the live action, how they incorporated leaves from the vine, I think it was well done. But that's all I have for today's episode. I wanted to yap a little bit just because I feel like my last 2 podcast episodes, I feel like they were well done. They just were on the shorter side. I feel like I kind of sped through the episodes a little bit, but I feel like for this one, I kind of took my time. And my closing thought is, moving forward, like, at least before the NFL season returns, I'm going to try to learn how to update my podcast logo myself, just to have that skill. And I'm likely going to try to change the music. But the whole point of the I Am Passionate podcast, and the reason why the podcast's name is the I Am Passionate podcast, is because I view myself as a person who's passionate about a lot of things, and with my interests. So literally the whole point of this podcast is to talk about the things that I'm interested in, the things that I'm passionate about. But I want to thank you all for listening to this episode of the I Am Passionate podcast. I'm your host, Jaren Smith, and I'll see you all next time.